Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Welcome to The Courage Effect, and welcome to the 2026 season. It is wonderful to be back, and I am ready to kick off this new season with a question. Have you ever woken up in your life and realized, where am I right now? Did I choose this on purpose? Was this by design? Or is this something that I fell into? I'm sure that all of us have been at this point in some way. Even if we're the most planful of people, there are things that happen in our lives that aren't necessarily expected. And sometimes we find ourselves following instructions that we didn't necessarily write, or maybe it was a plan that didn't suit us or no longer suits us. I've been spending a lot of time in my larger work around leadership development, really anchoring on themes about the environments that we create as leaders. And the theme that is going to be running through this season of The Courage Effect is going to be the idea of us not only living and working in environments, but creating them in the process, not just for ourselves, but for our teams and for our organizations and our communities in our larger world. And as I was honing in on this theme, I came up with a guest that I knew would be the perfect person to start these conversations. My guest for the first show of this new season of The Courage Effect is Kibben. Let me tell you a little bit about Kat before I dive into our conversation. Kibben is a leadership speaker, LinkedIn top voice, and the founder of 3 Ears Media. They are known for transforming how companies attract great talent and build healthy team culture. With 15 plus years of experience at globally recognized brands like Monster.com, Kat shares weekly reflections on leadership, work, and well-being in their newsletter. It comes out every week, and you can get that at KatrinaKibben.com. We will include that in the show notes. They are also a LinkedIn top voice, have been featured in the New York Times and in Forbes, and are also a 2-time author. The first book was This Was All an Accident. And the second one, which we are going to be talking about today, is The Bounce Back Factor, the leader's guide to liking yourself while leading your people. What really struck me about this book, and we have a lot of conversation around it, is how Kat changed their environment deliberately. Not waiting for things to happen in their life to make the change happen. But they sold their house, bought a van, and went on the open road for 3 years to both live and run a business. There are some great stories in this book, some that are also very painful. And there's a lot of lessons around how you can ask for help in the moments where maybe you don't want to, but that's what you need to do to learn and to grow. How sometimes moving backwards is the best and right path. It will get you to where you really need to be instead of forward. And there's so much here for us as humans as well. How do we learn from experiences, and how do we learn from each other? So Kat, thank you for bringing your generosity, your courage, and your larger just way that you exist in the world and bring it to other people. Because these are messages that I think we all need to hear in different ways. And it's about how do we tap into our courage, build resilience, and learn from each other to create more emergent and generative communities and environments. Enjoy the conversation. Let's dive in. I am thrilled for this conversation today. I have been anticipating this conversation for a good 3 months because we scheduled this at the end of 2025, and it's really wonderful to actually be in conversation with you, Kat. So Kat, welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this one too.
I just finished your book a couple of days ago, and that is your newer book, The Bounce Back Factor, The Leader's Guide to Liking Yourself While Leading Your People. And this, in so many ways, embodies a lot of the work that I am doing right now, and it really embodies the whole theme of this season of The Courage Effect, which I think is the idea of you are in an environment, maybe you need to change your environment, and you have the power to be able to influence not only the environment that you're in, but what you're creating while you're there. So talk to us about the book and talk to us a little bit about you, because as we're going to have a whole conversation about van life, since that's so much of what your book is about. But as we embark on this conversation and you think about that theme, so not only do you live and work in an environment, but you create it. Tell us a little bit about Kat and how you jump into that environment.
Yeah, so my name is Kibben. I run a company called 3 Ears Media, and more than what I do, I believe that if nothing changes about you, nothing changes about work.
Mm.
And I have spent the last 15 plus, we'll go with that, years working in the world of recruiting to remind them how to be more human. Whether it was by creating better job postings, rewriting a LinkedIn profile to actually make yourself a connect with the people who are reading it,
Mhm.
or through my blog where I'm telling the stories of everything I'm learning by doing this work, and living my life where I spent 3 years traveling this country while running my business. And it was the ultimate pressure test of every rule I ever made about working and the inspiration behind the book and kind of the lessons that were distilled from that experience.
So great. Well, and I also want you to give the audience an opportunity to understand. I mean, we are talking about someone who they, they sold their house, moved into a van, bought a van, moved into a van. And as you said, you spent 3 years not only on the road, but running a business.
Yeah.
What sparked you to embrace van life?
Yeah, I think it was the 10 years of corporate America prior to that, and then 5 years of being an entrepreneur. And if you've done either of those work adventures, both can be equally exhausting in their own ways. And I experienced a lot of toxic managers over that period. Something I know you talk about too is this idea that people can be toxic without realizing it. And I
Mhm.
have so much empathy for those managers, but they left scars on me. And when I migrated from corporate America into the world of entrepreneurship, so many of the things I thought were true about work, I
Mm.
kind of, that was the first time I was the boss. There was no one else to blame if things didn't go well. And if you ever really want to challenge yourself, right, and you want to hold up a mirror to every part of your life, go into entrepreneurship, because 5 years in, I felt like I had checked all the boxes and I had done everything right. And I'm air quoting for the people who are just listening. It's like I really thought I had done it all and that I was just going to arrive at happiness. And I felt so unsteady. And that's what kind of propelled me toward that van life, as being a type A overachiever and realizing there was no finish line. There was no good enough. There wasn't some day where everything was just going to be right. I had to actually rewire how I handled uncertainty.
So were you looking for uncertainty?
I think what I know about myself, and I write about this in the book, is that in order for me to challenge those roadblocks that I identify in my life, I almost have to go to an extreme. Like that's what works for me.
Yeah.
And I feel that everyone should know how they learn, how they change, what drives them, because it can't be something really, really bad happening in your life. And I think a lot of people wait for the bad thing to happen to change their life or something that makes them uncomfortable. And that's not me. I'm very proud to say that if something I don't like something about my life, I'll do the work. I will always do the work. And so in the past, that's looked like no, wanting to improve my health when I turned 30 and realizing that I didn't want to be in pain in my 50s and 60s like my family members. And I didn't get a trainer at the gym. I signed up for one of the hardest obstacle courses in the world, a Tough Mudder,
Yeah.
because I literally, for me, it motivated me to work out sometimes twice a day, to know that people sign death waivers when they do this. And I'm not exaggerating, right?
I didn't know that, by the way.
It's
Like, I know many
true.
people that had done mutters, but then when I read your book, I was like, oh my God, there's a death waiver. So, yeah, hello.
Oh, I was electrocuted. But I say all of this because, again, that works for me. For some other people, if they get a
Yeah.
plan and they have accountability, that works for them. If they, right? But I light the fire under me. And at this period of my life, I just felt like I was constantly seeking, and that somehow the van was a place where I could incorporate seeking into how I lived my life
Mm.
instead of feeling like I was just waiting for the next time to go.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate the idea of living in extremes and knowing that that's how you learn, because knowing what are the things that help us versus what are the things that get in our way. And I'm curious for you. I mean, and obviously I've read your book, so I know some of these answers. But what are some of the things that you discovered that were getting in your way?
Yeah. You know, I I think there's a theme to the things that were getting in my way, and it's things that I assumed were true that are not true. And this illusion exists for all of us because success is not uniform, and neither is our experience in corporate America. And I think what happens is that
Yeah.
we experience extremes of uncertainty. Fill in the
Mhm.
blank. Toxic manager. You get laid off. You get furloughed. You experience all of these things in life, and it conditions us to believe that. Well, we are conditioned as humans to believe that our behavior is why that happened.
Mhm.
And then you make a rule to overcompensate for the uncertainty because you think that if you live by the rules that everything will be fine. And that is not real. Unfortunately, I'm watching the nod and like deep sigh on your side because we've all been there,
Yeah.
all of us. And that, what an unfortunate certainty of work that it almost traumatizes us into compensating how we live our life. We change how we live our life as a
Yeah.
consequence of how we're treated at work.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it almost traumatizes us. I would say it does traumatize us. And then that's the scar tissue that we carry forward. And unfortunately, that becomes the polish and almost the veneer for what's next.
Yeah. And our management style is a direct reflection of how much or how little healing you have done in that process. And often, unfortunately, it's the latter of the lack of healing is what's showing up at work.
Yeah. I'm curious, before you bought the van, before you took the leap, what environment were you unconsciously creating? And maybe you weren't seeing it.
That is a really good question. One of those deep questions that I could probably answer for like an hour, but I think what I didn't know then that I think I know today
Yeah.
is that in order to be successful, you do not have to be constantly seeking. I think capitalism benefits from all of us thinking that there is an everlasting finish line that's eluding us.
Yeah.
And the reality is that you can be still, you can be fully present and be highly successful. And I actually believe that is a competitive advantage going into whatever the future of work looks like, no matter how it turns out, is how present can you be, both emotionally and I think in business, in marketing, in everything. But it starts with you, you know? It starts with your relationship with yourself.
Yes, and that really brings me full circle because I come to your lessons at the end of this book, right? And your whole journey, which was you were really searching for peace and peace within yourself. So you're making me think about that.
Well, and knowing how to find it
Yeah.
when things aren't on beat. Because, like, everyone can be happy when things are easy, but I think we all learned in 2020 that everything could change. And that both expanded our minds, but also I think limited our consciousness in some way because we wanted to go back
Yeah.
instead of pursue that new future. And I think that's also just a consequence of us not having the tools we need to navigate uncertainty confidently.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other thing that is also really present for me in your book is how important it is to ask for help. How important it is for us to know in those moments that we don't necessarily know the answer. It's okay to not know the answer, but how do we potentially find the answer? And that it takes working with others or raising our hand to actually see that.
Yeah. I, well, because leadership it feels like an autonomous journey. And I think this is one of the mistakes we make in our development is that the first half of your career is spent being told no one is going to protect you. You have to drive forward. No one cares about your career as much as you, right? We've all heard those toxic little lines,
Yeah.
and companies invest in you being kind of like a unitasker.
Mhm.
And then at some point, they expect you to be functional from a leadership perspective by what? Osmosis? You know?
Great
Like
point.
we all of a sudden in the second half of your career, you're supposed to be able to lead all of these people, but we will provide you with none of those tools, nor will we incentivize your ability to be able to connect with those people. There's no incentive to being a great leader.
Yeah, and understanding that leadership evolves, as do you as a human being, as does your organization, as do the needs of what's happening. I mean, every single day I have a conversation with somebody that is in some way about the multi-generational workplace
Mm,
and the tensions and the stress of people not necessarily wanting the same things as them, and the frustration and the anger and the way that it's such an obstacle for so many people. And you're making me think about that. Like, the skills that we got in our 20s, and maybe for like I'm in my 50s, so for those of us like in your
yeah,
30s, maybe in your 40s, it's a different set that you need now, or it's an evolved set. So
yeah,
yeah, the idea of osmosis, yeah, great idea, but not reality.
right. Well, and I also think like we almost buy into the idea that leadership should be autonomous, that if you're the leader, then you're supposed to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And that can be so, so toxic because the reality is like, and this is a cycle of the world, is that we are in a timeline where we are in hyper innovation.
Mhm.
And hyper innovation implies that no one knows the answer.
Yeah.
Like, what better time to build your network, to build your ability to ask for help than now when there's a lot of known unknowns? And that's pretty much all we've got to rely on.
Known unknowns. I like that. And you're also making me think about like when you first start a new job, it's like, okay, I'm the newbie. I have my little honeymoon period and I can ask all the questions that I might be afraid to ask in a year's
Yes.
time. And it's like, how do we then just get more comfortable with asking those questions all the time instead of just when you're the newbie?
Yep. And I love when teams actually start to build that in instead of just making it kind of a newbie's benefit,
Mhm.
like it's a perk only given to people who shouldn't know all the answers. And you're like, wait a minute, is that an expectation? But most people never say that out loud. And
Yeah.
how I see that working with teams is, even just adding a 10-minute hot seat to the end of every team meeting. So this can be really, really simple, and it's live problem solving where everyone helps each other solve problems. And what I love about something like this is number one, it costs nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing, not even
Yeah.
time, because all you have to do is really like put names next to a meeting calendar and tell them. And then the second layer of that is that you start to learn other people's expertise and who to ask when the problem comes up. Because I think that's half the battle is that we don't actually know each other's expertise and
Yeah.
what skills that person has beyond the things I rely on them to do by themselves.
Totally. And I let you talk about masterminds in the book.
Mm,
So, and I've run a mastermind and I love it so much. And I love seeing people, exactly as you said, ask questions of each other and bring their expertise through inquiry, not through solutioning immediately. And that allows them to learn how to coach each other. That allows us to be in a different space where we're not always trying to fix the problem, because a lot of the time they're not our problems to solve. And I love that you're talking about it just with building that sort of elasticity in an organization and a culture where that should be normal. Not knowing the
yes.
answer should not necessarily be something that is accepted but celebrated.
And and I don't want to go down the politics line, but I think that skill makes us better community members. I think
Yes.
it makes us more tolerant humans toward each other.
Yeah.
And I just believe deeply in people's ability to be good when we allow them to learn and change and make space for questions. And I say this as a queer person who lives out loud and answers a lot of obnoxious questions. And I am always willing, because I know that learning and discomfort are critical in order to be a healthy community. And masterminds, I feel like, were my first playground where I learned how to be really uncomfortable
Mm.
around my peers.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's almost like welcoming in discomfort and then building that out into a larger skill set for you to be able to bring and to your entire life and to live that way.
And reframing discomfort as learning environments.
Yeah.
That there's something to learn from every single one of those uncomfortable moments, that those are kind of, I almost think of them as like advent calendar doors, like tiny little doors that you open something up. If you feel uncomfortable, right? There's something back there. Maybe not a treat.
Yeah, maybe not a little treat, a candy. So you're making me think about some of the unexpected things that happened to you on during your van life, and
So
there's
many.
there's there's quite there's some pretty memorable ones. I'd love for you to talk about maybe one of those experiences that was one of the most uncomfortable and yet one of the most valuable for you.
Yeah. I have a feeling you're going to remember this one. And it's the lesson here is that going backwards is good enough. So, a good friend of mine, I'll tell the shortest version of this that I can, but a very good friend of mine comes to visit me in rural Idaho, of all places. And he's from the area, and he's also an avid camper. And so I'm really excited because I was not an avid camper before I went into van life. And so a few months in, like, I had questions. And so he comes out to visit me, and before we leave, he says, "All right, well, I'm really excited. I want to record a podcast with you. I did this like Google Air view, and I found this little pond. So we're just going to go down this road, and then when we get there, we'll record our podcast." And I was like, "All right." Now, you should know that I am a type A overachiever and a planner. And so while you may think that van life is just super woo woo, I was planned out like 6 weeks at a time. Like I knew where I was going, I knew everything. And I was like trying to be more brave than I am in this moment, knowing I don't know what I don't know. And
Yeah.
so we turn off onto this side road, and I'm like, okay, be brave, right? And I kind of passed the signs. I wasn't paying attention to little signs that would have told me this might be a bad idea. And as we proceed down the road just gets more narrow, the trees get lower, and basically we pull up to a bridge where we get stuck. And the bridge is not wide enough for my friend's small little pickup truck to cross, let alone my very, very large van, nor is the road wide enough for me to turn my van around. And it took about an hour of attempts to cut down trees, do a 1,000 point turn, and a million other ways until an ATV pulled up on the other side, laughed in our faces, and then said, "Well, go backwards." And I was like, "Oh, so then I literally drove a mile backwards. And the business lesson there is that sometimes backwards is good enough, but we are never told that we should go anywhere besides forward.
Yeah.
Um, and like you got to see all of your options to handle uncertainty. I think resilience is one of those muscles. And the biggest thing that makes people more resilient is realizing that there's always more options. And even in a scenario in which you're driving backwards. And to this day, I give him hell for that, by the way. We're still friends, even after all of that. He was sure I was going to murder him after this, but he's still been welcome to eat in our home and visit and all of those things.
I love that though, the idea of it's not just one way. And I think it's really, I mean, what a hard way to learn that lesson. But it is that idea of like, oh, I mean, just the obvious alternative that we just can't see for ourselves. But I thought it was interesting too that you talked a lot about that leading to decision paralysis is really only seeing one way forward. Was that something that you consistently experienced and continue to in your work, or at least the companies you work with?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
I really think like deciding to change is the hardest part and probably what will stand between most of you and your AI aspirations. It has nothing to do with the technology. It has nothing to do with the ability of agents. It has nothing to do with the ability of your team. It has everything to do with bureaucracy and our commitment to doing things the same way. It's
Yeah.
why job postings haven't changed in 100 years. And it's why we have so many systems we know don't work that get copied and pasted over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. That's actually really true.
I, I specialize in recruiting and I do a obscene amount of research. I kind of think like I have a PhD in recruiting now after 15 years of reading and writing about it simply because I think we should do better. And it is harrowing. I'm going to use that word very intentionally. It is harrowing to me how few of our systems that we use for hiring have evolved at all. Interviewing has not evolved at all. Job postings, not at all. Assessment, not at all. And that scares me because what it is and what we realize now that AI is here saying, what is the baseline? What does good mean? As kind of a core component, it's the first time anyone has realized that we've always been guessing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that makes me like garbage in, garbage out. So we have all of these machines that are supposed to make us smarter and be able to do these things more effectively. But because we go back to old broken systems, it's really no better.
Yeah. Well, and even if you tie that in, right, we think about the value of humans in the
Mhm.
world and where our evolving value continues to be. It's not going to be the garbage in, garbage out. It's going to be identifying that thing as garbage.
Totally.
And I think part of that is going to be this emotional rewiring too around the trauma that made us build the rules, back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think courage comes into that?
I think it comes at literally the first decision to say, like, I don't like this and I'm willing to change. I think that's the exact tipping point is the willingness, not even the observation. And that's because we as humans are hardwired not to change.
Yeah.
You know, the example I give in the book and the one that makes everyone laugh when I talk about is like cavemen, right? The cave people who ran when they heard a snapping in a bush, those are our ancestors. The people who did not run do not have ancestors, right? It is hardwired. And then
Yeah.
if you really start to layer historical trends, if you start to layer um, let's say civil rights and movements in which people have literally had to fight just to have equal rights to the person standing next to them, you start to realize like this uncertainty or even the certainty around what will serve us, it's like it is complicated. It's not one size fits all. It is highly shaped by the world
Mhm.
that you live in. And then we all show up to work and we all have one goal. Something has to happen between those two, and the leadership formula we have today is nowhere near the right answer.
Yeah. How do you think we shift the leadership formula?
I think I think it begins, I'm totally biased, right? Because that's what I'm trying to do with my work right now. Is to help teams build systems that make them more resilient, to treat resilience like a muscle that leaders are supposed to enable, because I think it feeds all of the other things that we say managers are supposed to do, which is to develop people, to help them grow, to challenge their beliefs, whatever, right? And I think
Mhm.
you can't do all of that unless you make your team resilient. So I think that's where it starts. And then I think the bigger answer, the kind of macro answer is please teach people how to be leaders. God, like
Yeah.
people are so unpredictable. Why do we expect anyone to just be good at that?
Yes, very much so. And I think that that's the other thing. I also just recently read Brene Brown's most recent book, Strong Ground. And there's a whole chapter, and I don't know if you've read it yet, but with Jenny Clark, and they talk about the difference between managers and leaders. And Brene basically is saying like, oh, it's the same thing. And Jenny Clark is saying, no, it's not. And this is why. And it's so interesting to really, I think, dive deeper into that because there are different roles. And just because you are a manager of people doesn't necessarily mean that you are a leader. And just
Right.
because you're a leader doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing it effectively. But that's one of the things that I am really passionate about is how do we as humans start to build that skill set to be able to understand how we react to what's happening in our world and then how we bring other people along, right? Like, how does that influence that vision, that ability to lead, not only as an individual, but as a team?
Yeah. Well, because inevitably, right? Like that's when your most toxic behaviors show up, is
Totally.
when you're navigating uncertainty. Like your good days, of course, you can show
Yeah.
up as your
Yeah. It's
best
golden.
person and do all the right things. And then what happens when someone challenges your beliefs constantly? What happens when you don't have anyone to ask for help? What happens when you don't know how to
Yeah.
coach? Right?
Yeah.
There's so many layers. And I think we just don't provide answers for that because, again, it's like, I would love to know where they think people learn how to be leaders. Like, just touch the wall and then touch the laptop at the same time. And then
Osmosis, as you said. So there you go.
water. They're like plants. You just feed them fertilizer. Like, I don't, what?
I'm curious what you think resilience looks like for teams and for leaders.
I deeply believe that it is being able to navigate uncertainty with confidence and make decisions that you're proud of. And knowing, I think there's kind of that second dimension of knowing how to apply an ethical lens. Because the decisions that we have to make when machines become a larger portion of the output require that of us. And I think when you kind of get into that distinction of a manager versus a leader, I think that's where I've always seen the biggest opportunity is like a manager can dictate, but a leader is someone I know I can rely on when things go wrong.
Mm.
You know, I think of that first manager I had during the very first time I ever got laid off, and she got the first envelope. And you know what she did the day she got laid off? She took me to lunch and told me what to expect for the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
She told me how to navigate what would happen next. You know? Like,
That's a remarkable person.
she told me what's in the envelope. She showed me her envelope. You know?
Yeah.
That is leadership. Because it was guided by what she knew was right.
Yeah. And what's also coming up for me is it's not all about you. Like, even if you're impacted horribly by something, it's not just about you.
I was listening to an interview with Ani DeFranco a few weeks ago, and I will not mention the name of the podcast because I thought the interviewer did a very poor job, because he was very dismissive of the experience that she was talking about as someone who's been an outsider and what it means to be an outsider, because she talked about the complexity of 9/11 happening. And suddenly, if you had white skin, you could be an insider, no matter what you looked like. And
Yeah.
suddenly the only outsiders were people who didn't have white skin. And that is a very complicated topic. One I do not feel equipped to discuss at length or with any depth of complexity. But the thing that she said, because he said, well, what are you going to do about that? And that's why I didn't really love because it was very dismissive. But what she said next was really powerful and something that I think any leader can learn from. And she said, what you can do is recognize when your privilege changes and use that to live a better life and to help others. And I thought that was really, really powerful and something that every manager can realize. And I surely did not when I was in my 20s and I had my first management position, but to realize that my privilege had changed. And I think that's what that leader knew that I didn't at that age, is like she knew that she had more privilege than me, even though she was on her way out. And that she could use that privilege and that experience to help me. And again, I think that's what we're here for. That's why we need each other, is because humans need each other when things go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. That was also one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot since I read your book was, what do we gain from other people? The knowledge, the support, the community, the connection. In your work now, what role does that play for you? I mean, how do you continue to keep the impact of what you've done over the past few years and beyond? I mean, I'm just curious, how do you partner with other people, and what kind of a role does that play in your work now?
Yeah, you know, I've I think letting go of the rules around work and thinking that I had to have all of the answers inherently meant that I had to accept reaching out to other people and involving other people in my success. And what it helps you realize really quickly is nobody is successful alone, no matter what they say.
Yeah.
That we are all one. And I believe that deeply from like a spiritual woo woo sense, but also a business level is like a rising tide lifts all ships. And so on day one of my business, that looked like I would call 3 people every single day. Every single day I'd call 3 new people and I would just say, what do you have to tell me? What do you think I should learn?
Yeah.
What's the most important thing you think I should know going into this?
Yeah.
And to this day, I repeat some of those lessons to myself. And
Mm.
then fast forward to today, it's like, you know, I also make myself available for conversations like that. I always make time for listening in any engagement that I have. For example, today I have a speaking engagement coming up in April where I'm doing kind of the closing keynote for a volunteer symposium. And so today I sat down with someone who's been a volunteer for 7 years and I was like, what do you think they need? Like they all hit that end point. They've been sitting there for 2 days. You've been brain dumping on them.
Yeah.
What do they need to know as they walk out of that door, knowing, the circumstances that are ahead of them, the realities of today that people don't actually like volunteering, right? Like people are all feeling overwhelmed and volunteerism is down nationally.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, I always want to drive with purpose, both in my work and my life. And my purpose has always been like, I want to crack the door a little bit, whether it's for a volunteer group that I've never met before or somebody who's just like me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The word that's coming up for me too is generosity.
Mm.
And because I think a lot of us, we either expect that's going to happen or I think that then it can get a little bit complicated with the other things that come in. But how do we build in generosity in a way that is not too giving of ourselves, but is also generative with beyond? And that's one of the things too that I've seen work really effectively in organizations is when they build in some sort of generosity around learning or just larger understanding of what's going on. I mean, I worked for Slalom Consulting for a while, and they actually gave you a budget as a new employee, like go and reach out to people and take them out for coffee so that you can learn from them.
Yeah.
And like we should all just have that, right? We should all like create our own budget for and build that into our culture of like people are going to want to, I mean, I'm not a fan of the phrase pick your brain, but people are going to want to learn from you and to want to better understand your experience so they have a better experience. So I'm curious for you, when do you see that in your life?
Yeah. I I guess I think of it from a marginally different angle, right? So what I think you were just describing is the essential definition of values-based living, right? Is saying, so in that example, and I love when I hear this about companies because I'm like, oh, it's finally working, right? Because EVPs are often just like posters and not something that actually
Ugh.
influences how we live.
Yep.
And so what I was hearing is, oh my gosh, they're actually showing and living their values, not just saying that's something that they value.
Yep.
And so how I always think of it is like, I kind of do a values assessment of my own of like what's most important to me at that time, usually at the beginning of the year around my
Mhm.
birthday, right? Like those benchmark periods. And then I
Mhm.
really think about choices in that framework of those values. And so for me, generosity is a value and like a lens of how I look at every decision I make. And so how it might show up is I do so many free speaking engagements every year because I know that recruiting suffers because there's no education pipeline.
Yeah.
We don't all have equal access to learning. And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why candidates have such awful experiences, right? So I do a lot of free learning for that purpose because it'll help those job seekers ultimately. And like I said, rising tide and my value of truth. And so I might go into a space where I don't agree with every person who's speaking at that event. But if that event has not asked me to limit what I say or to not to speak my truth, I'm willing to engage with people who don't agree with me.
Yeah.
Right. And so, again, I think it's for everyone. It's like, I think it just comes back to really deeply knowing your values and having a way of saying, using that as your filter every time.
Yeah, I love that. Embodying them, not just saying it.
Yeah. And when you don't know what to do, that's where you go back to.
Yeah.
Am I feeling weird because this goes against my values? Is there a value-based answer to this? Right. And allowing yourself to just imagine every answer and then narrow it down from there instead of thinking like, I'm just working towards the one right answer and I'm just 4 steps from figuring it out. You know how it is.
Totally. Totally. And yeah, the damn posters. I mean, it's just a matter of, for whatever posters are worth anymore. You're also making me think about quitting. Quitting was one of the things in your book too, just about that's where a lot of the transformation can happen. What are the things that we really have to let go of and just sort of subtract from our life? So how do you think that we reframe quitting as a design rather than a defect?
Yeah. Well, I think step one is practicing quitting.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I give this talk, I always have to remind people, especially if I'm at a company, right? The boss is in the room here, and I have to be like, I am not talking about quitting your job. I am talking about little quits, like that book you don't actually like, that's half read on your side table that you're force reading. You can quit. If you don't like running, don't run. I tell people, if you see me running, boy, you better run too. Faster than me. At least one pace faster, because I'll get fast if I have to, right?
Yeah.
Like, we need to practice little quits so we're ready for big quits.
Yeah.
Because big quits make room in our lives. I think, and this is kind of like probably a woo-woo answer to this, but hey, we're talking about courage, and I think courage always has to have a dash of soul. Is like, if you ask the universe for something, you got to make room for the thing, and it will make a way. If something is meant for you, we've all been there. If you are of us, I'm in my 40s now. We've had those moments where there have been things, and then you have a day where you think, that was all supposed to happen. That was exactly how it was supposed to be.
Yeah, meant to be. Yeah.
And I think if we know and we can trust that that day is coming, we can fail faster, right? Like, I saw this post the other week that I keep thinking about, and it said, if you knew you were 30 failures away from your best $1 billion idea, how quickly would you fail? I'm like, I would fail the hell out of today. And I've been trying to apply a little bit of that energy because that's not my thing.
I hear you. Mine either.
But I'll tell you, I've been trying, and it's been a lot more fun.
Fun. That's such an important word.
It's a better F word than the other F word that you would say when we fail.
Depending on the context, yes. So, Kat, I'm curious, as we wrap up this conversation, on the other side of your journey of the van life and where you've come as far as corporate and where you are now with entrepreneurship and otherwise, what environment would you say you're actually creating now?
Yeah. What came up for me was this sticker that I have, and it says grow, grow, grow. And it's a picture of all these mushrooms growing at different stages. And I think what that experience prepared for me is that I realized that I am ground zero, not all of these other things that are external to me. And that has given me so much permission to just try and to work from a deep-seated belief that I think things will be okay for me, that I will be okay. And even just starting out from a place where I can say that with confidence, I think allows me a lot more permission to challenge what comes up, or at least be able to say what doesn't work for me.
Yeah, giving yourself grace. And I appreciate that so much because I think it goes along with like the failure idea. So giving yourself permission to fail, and giving other people that too. So there's a certain amount of benefit of the doubt, but it sounds like also presence, really listening and planning is good, but there's only so much that you can plan for. That's another thing that I'm hearing. So being open and being resilient to what might come that you don't expect, and being able
Yeah.
to incorporate that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. Acceptance. That's the gift of the 40th year of my life, is deep acceptance of this day, this time, this world, this reality, because I can't get very far if I can't just accept that some things are, and I still have a lot of autonomy. And I'm very, very blessed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am really grateful that you were doing the work that you were doing. I'm grateful that you are influencing cultures and organizations of all sizes. I'm grateful that you're also giving your time and your energy to people that are doing volunteer work, because that's also something that is very much needed. I really love your newsletter that is out every week. You want to talk a little bit about your newsletter as we wrap up?
I would love to. That was actually part of the inspiration behind the book too. So on Tuesdays I write for recruiters, but on Friday I write a letter about life. And it is kind of a creative writing challenge for me every week, because as a type A overachiever, that recruiting blog is like, I write that 4 weeks ago. It wraps up way earlier, but that letter I start on Monday and I share on Friday. And so it's always just like a real time reflection. And I think if you loved this conversation, you will definitely love those letters.
It's a great newsletter. So if you have not signed up yet, you can go to katrinakibben.com and sign up for that. But thank you. Such a great conversation, Kat. I'm so grateful that I was also able to meet you through all of this and that we were able to share this conversation with the world. Any final thoughts you want to share?
No, just thank you for such thoughtful questions and for having me. I really hope the people who listened to this got as much out of it as I did.
No. Thank you. Well, you heard that, everybody. Stay courageous, be well, and thank you again, Kat, for joining us. Thanks for spending time with me at The Courage Effect. Before you go, a reminder. The way that you lead is the way that you live. There is no brave version of you at work that shows up small everywhere else. Courage does not compartmentalize. It is a daily practice in the small choices you make that nobody claps for. That is the work that we do at Weller Collaboration, helping leaders to stop performing leadership and start practicing it from a lived, real place. For more information, check out wellercollaboration.com. If this episode gave you something, please listen to our next one. That's how you can give back. Share it with somebody else who is wrestling with their own brave next step, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. A quick thank you to my guest, to Dave Nelson for creating our theme music, and to Heather Gronick for her administrative magic. I am Suzanne Weller. Keep choosing courage, one honest moment at a time. I'll see you for our next show.